At 35, I stood on the sidewalk outside the apartment I could no longer afford, holding 2 cardboard boxes that contained almost everything I owned. My car was gone. My job was gone. My savings were gone. Even the apartment behind me, the place where I had spent years believing I was building a stable life, was no longer mine. Rain fell against my face as I watched the landlord lock the door, and for the first time in my life, I had absolutely no idea where I was going to sleep that night. I remember looking at my reflection in the dark window and barely recognizing the exhausted person staring back at me. I had spent years believing that if I worked hard, stayed honest, and did everything right, life would eventually reward me. But that night, I had nothing left except a broken phone, a few clothes, and the painful feeling that I had failed at life. If you believe that kindness can save someone, that people deserve second chances, and that one small act can completely change a life, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment and subscribe to the channel. Because sometimes the person who looks like they have given up is actually just waiting for someone to remind them that they still have a reason to keep going. My life hadn't always been like this. A few years earlier, I had a good job, a comfortable apartment, and a future that seemed predictable. I wasn't rich, but I was proud of what I had built. I woke up every morning, went to work, paid my bills, and tried to save something for the future. Then the company I worked for suddenly downsized. At first, I wasn't worried. I had experience, good references, and enough savings to survive for a while. I believed I would find another job quickly. But weeks became months. Interviews turned into rejection emails. Rejection emails turned into silence. Every morning, I sent applications. Every afternoon, I checked my phone. Every evening, I convinced myself that tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow wasn't different. My savings slowly disappeared. First came the unnecessary expenses. Then the things I had promised myself I would never sell. My television went first. Then my furniture. Eventually, I sold my car. I started walking everywhere and pretending it didn't bother me. I stopped meeting friends because I couldn't afford restaurants anymore. When people asked how I was doing, I smiled and said everything was fine. The truth was that I was terrified. Then came the medical bills after my mother became seriously ill. I used what little money I had left to help her. I didn't regret it for a second, but it pushed me closer to the edge. By the time I turned 35, my savings account was empty. My credit cards were maxed out. My rent was overdue, and the job I had been counting on never came. The night I lost my apartment, I sat on a bench outside a 24-hour laundromat with my 2 boxes beside me. Cars passed in the rain, people walked under umbrellas, and nobody knew that the man sitting there had just lost nearly everything. I kept asking myself the same question. How did I get here? I didn't have an answer. Around midnight, an elderly man walked out of the laundromat carrying a small bag. He noticed me sitting there alone. He stopped, looked at the boxes beside me, and then looked at my face. He didn't ask me what had happened. He simply sat down several feet away. After a few minutes, he quietly placed a cup of coffee beside me. It was such a small thing, but I almost cried. He eventually learned that I had nowhere to go. Instead of giving me money, he offered something I needed much more. He told me about a small repair shop he owned across town. The business was struggling, and he needed someone willing to work hard. He said he couldn't promise me a great salary, and he couldn't promise the job would be easy. But he could promise me one thing. If I was willing to show up every morning, he would give me a chance. I almost said no. My pride told me that at 35, I shouldn't be taking an entry-level job from a stranger. I had once sat behind an office desk wearing expensive clothes. Now I was being offered a chance to clean floors, organize inventory, and learn a trade I knew almost nothing about. But then I looked at my 2 cardboard boxes. Pride couldn't give me a place to sleep. So the next morning I showed up. The repair shop was small, old, and filled with broken equipment. The owner was named Daniel. He was 71 years old, and he treated every customer like family. He taught me how to repair things, how to speak honestly with customers, and how to keep working even when business was slow. But most importantly, he taught me something I had forgotten. Losing everything doesn't mean you have become nothing. The first few months were difficult. I slept in a tiny room behind the shop. I worked long hours and saved every dollar I could. There were days when my hands hurt and my confidence disappeared. Sometimes I wondered whether I had ruined my life permanently. Daniel never gave me empty motivational speeches. Instead, he would quietly hand me another task. Work, learn, try again. Slowly, something inside me began to change. I stopped measuring my worth by my bank account. I started measuring it by how much I could learn, how many problems I could solve, and how many times I could get back up after falling. 1 year later, I had become one of the best repair technicians in the shop. Customers began asking specifically for me. I started helping Daniel with the business. I learned about inventory, pricing, accounting, and customer service. For the first time in years, I wasn't simply surviving. I was rebuilding. Then one winter morning, Daniel called me into his office. He placed a set of keys on the desk. They were the keys to the shop. I couldn't understand why he was giving them to me. He explained that he was retiring and had decided to sell the business. But instead of selling it to the highest bidder, he wanted to give me the opportunity to buy it gradually. He had watched me rebuild my life from nothing, and he believed I was ready. I couldn't speak. The same man who had found me sitting helplessly on a rainy sidewalk had become the person who helped me stand again. Over the next 2 years, I worked harder than I had ever worked before. I paid Daniel back slowly, month after month. The shop grew. We hired 2 employees, then 3. Customers who had once known Daniel began trusting me with their businesses and their families. One afternoon, I stood outside that same shop holding the keys in my hand. The sign above the door still carried Daniel's name, but underneath it was a smaller sign with mine. I thought about the rainy night when I believed my life was over. I thought about the 2 cardboard boxes. I thought about the cup of coffee. And I realized that my greatest loss had secretly become the beginning of my greatest transformation. Daniel hadn't saved me by giving me money. He saved me by giving me a chance. Sometimes that's all a person needs. Not someone to solve their entire life. Not someone to erase their mistakes. Just someone willing to look at them when they feel worthless and say, through their actions, that they are still worth another chance. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, share it with someone who may be struggling silently, and subscribe to the channel. Your simple engagement can help this story reach someone who desperately needs to hear it today. And before you leave, I want you to do one thing. Comment, "Everyone deserves a second chance." If you believe people can rebuild their lives after losing everything, you never know who might read your comment on the darkest night of their life. Today, I'm 40 years old. I still have difficult days. I still make mistakes. But whenever life becomes hard, I remember that rainy night and the stranger who decided not to walk past me. I once thought losing everything was the end of my story. It wasn't. It was the chapter where my real story finally began. And sometimes, the person who gives you your last chance doesn't realize they are giving you the first chance to become the person you were always meant to be.